Welcome, listeners, to Phantom Fables, your gateway to the world of shadows, secrets, and spine-chilling tales. Tonight, we venture into the forgotten, the mansion of Bhawanipur, an ancient pale widow that silently saw centuries of terror unrolled. But beware, this isn't just a story, it's a warning. Some say the howling of the pale widow isn't the ghost at all, but the cries of something far darker, echoing through time. This is the story of the Pale Widow. The year was 1754, and the sun had set low across the horizon, casting a golden glow across the dusty plains of Bhawanipur, a remote village deep in the heart of India. The villagers were busy with their lives, steeped in simplicity and tradition. Yet, beneath the ordinary rhythm of life, an unspoken fear lingered, the legend of the Pale Widow. It was said that on moonless nights, a chilling wind would sweep through the village, carrying faint whispers. Those who ventured too close to the abandoned Mokshgarh Haveli, a crumbling mansion on the edge of the village, claimed to see a spectral figure draped in pale yellow, her eyes hollow, and her voice a mournful melody that echoed in the darkness. This legend reached the ears of young historian Arya Pratap Singh, who had a knack for unearthing truths hidden in folklore. Arya was tall, with sharp features, and a determined gaze that often unnerved those who met him. Accompanied by his loyal friend Karnesh Rawat, a skeptic and aspiring journalist, Arya decided to visit Bhawanipur to document the story of the Pale Widow. It was nearly sunset when they reached the village. The roads had been hard, with narrow paths and deep forests that seemed to suck in the daylight. As Arya entered the village, she saw the suspicion of the villagers. Karnesh leaned over and whispered, "These people look as if they have seen a ghost." Arya smiled. Perhaps they have, or at least they think they have. They were greeted by Pandit Vishwanath, an elderly man with a flowing white beard and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Arya introduced himself and explained his intention to learn about the legend. Pandit Vishwanath frowned. "The Pale Widow is not just a legend, young man. She is real. Many have tried to uncover her truth and have never returned. Mokshgarh Haveli is cursed. Stay away from it." Arya continued, "Panditji, every story has an origin. Surely you must know something about what happened there." The old man sighed very deep and started narrating the tale. Once it had been owned by Raja Devendra Singh, who was a greedy and ruthless landowner. His wife, Sundari Devi, was beautiful and virtuous. In reality, the life of Sundari was miserable as Devendra, in his blind greed and arrogant self, put his wife on a worse trial than death because of his false assumptions against her chastity. She was buried alive behind the walls of that Haveli. Legend had it that Sundari's spirit refused to leave. Her wrath cursed the Haveli, and those who dared disturb her were never seen again. Over time, the villagers abandoned the area, and the mansion fell into ruin. Pandit Vishwanath concluded, "She seeks justice, but her pain has turned into vengeance. Do not awaken her fury." Despite the ominous warning, Arya and Karnesh decided to explore the Haveli. That night, as the village slept under a blanket of stars, the two men set out with lanterns and a notebook. It was an eerie ride to the Haveli. The air cooled, and the stillness was only broken by rustling leaves. As they came closer to the mansion, it loomed over the night sky, its once grand facade now a shadow of decay. Karnesh hesitated. "Arya, maybe this isn't such a good idea." Arya shot him a reassuring look. "The truth doesn't come to those who wait, Karnesh. It comes to those who seek it." They pushed open the heavy wooden gates, which creaked in protest. The courtyard was overgrown with weeds, and the air smelled of damp earth. As they stepped inside, a sudden gust of wind extinguished their lanterns. "Did you feel that?" Karnesh's voice trembled. Before Arya could say anything, A gentle humming seemed to reverberate through the hall. It was a sorrow-filled, hauntingly beautiful melody. They followed the sound into a grand hall. The walls were covered with faded murals, and there was a large, swaying chandelier that seemed precariously attached to the ceiling. In the center of the room was a figure, a woman in a pale yellow sari. Her back was to them, but she radiated an overpowering presence. Arya's breath caught. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. The figure slowly turned around. Her face was a mask of anguish, her eyes dark voids that seemed to pierce through them. "Why have you come here?" she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Karnesh stumbled backward, but Arya stood his ground. "We want to know your story. We want to help." The woman's face contorted with anger. "You cannot assist me. You must go or suffer my punishment." The ground started shaking under their feet, and the air was heavy, as if full of the sounds of the creaking walls. Arya took hold of Karnesh's arm. "Run!" They ran out of the Haveli, the sound of the music following them into the night. Arya and Karnesh sat in the safety of their lodging, trying to make sense of it all. "She's real," Karnesh whispered, his hands trembling. "What do we do now?" Arya's eyes gleamed with determination. "We dig deeper. This isn't just about a ghost. There's a story here, and we need to uncover it." Unbeknownst to them, the Pale Widow had already marked them. The shadows of Mokshgarh Haveli were not easily escaped. The morning sun barely pierced the dense fog that had settled over Bhawanipur, casting the village in an eerie gray. The events of the previous night lingered in the minds of Arya and Karnesh, both unsettled but resolute in their pursuit of the truth. Over steaming cups of chai at the small inn where they stayed, they began piecing together their plan to uncover the secrets of Mokshgarh Haveli. "I don't think it's wise to go back," Karnesh muttered, his voice low. "That thing in the Haveli isn't just a spirit, it's something far worse." Arya set his cup down, his expression unreadable. "Fear clouds judgment, Karnesh. If we don't face her, we'll never understand what truly happened. We're not just chasing a ghost, we're chasing history." Karnesh sighed but nodded. "Fine, but we need more information before we step foot in that place again." Their first stop was the village temple, a centuries-old structure dedicated to Shiva, its stone walls adorned with intricate carvings. Pandit Vishwanath was already there, performing his morning prayers. When the prayers ended, Arya approached him. "Panditji, we need to know more about Sundari Devi. Is there anybody in the village who might have more details about her life or the events at Mokshgarh Haveli?" The old man hesitated before answering. "There is one person. Mira Bua, an elderly woman who has lived in Bhawanipur her entire life. She knows the stories passed down by her ancestors, but I warn you, her words may unsettle you further." Her hut was outside the village borders, overgrown with vegetation, and filled with the silence of solitude. The woman itself was fragile but piercing-eyed, her voice full of tremors brought by age, yet strong with conviction. "You seek the truth of Sundari Devi," she said, her eyes fixed on Arya. "Few dare to ask, but I see you are not like the others. Sit, and I will tell you what I know." As they settled onto the floor, Mira began her tale. Sundari was not just beautiful, she was a beacon of light in a world of darkness. Her kindness was unmatched, and the villagers adored her. But her husband, Raja Devendra Singh, was one of suspicion and cruelty. It was the silent night that had a servant trusted by Raja whispering lies to him that Sundari had committed infidelity. Without any proof, with no trail for judgment, he condemned Sundari to death as well, and burying her alive, she was given shelter within the Haveli. Her cries lasted for days before being extinguished. Mira paused, her eyes filled with mist. But Sundari did not rest. Her soul lingered, bound by betrayal and pain. Those who enter the Haveli disturb her slumber, and she does not forgive. As they were about to leave, Mira handed Arya a small, worn journal. This belonged to Sundari. It was found years ago by a villager brave enough to venture into the Haveli. Perhaps it will guide you. The journal was filled neat Devanagari script. The pages were yellowed with age. Arya started flipping through its pages, observing how boring the entries about daily life were until he found a series of frantic passages. Devendra does not trust me. I see it in his eyes. He whispers with the servants when he thinks I am not looking. I fear for my life. If anyone reads this, know that I am innocent. The last entry was smudged, the words barely legible. They are coming for me. I can hear them outside my chamber. If I do not survive, may the truth find its way to the light. That night, armed with Sundari's journal and a renewed sense of purpose, Arya and Karnesh made their way back to the Haveli. The fog had thickened, and the air carried a biting chill. This time, they came to the mansion with more caution. The gate creaked open as if waiting for them. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive, the walls pulsating with a life of their own. Arya clutched the journal tightly. We need to find her resting place. It's the only way to set her free. They started walking through the Haveli, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The grand hall from the previous night was eerily quiet, the chandelier swaying gently despite the still air. In one of the chambers, they discovered a hidden door concealed behind a tapestry. Pushing it open, they found a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. "This must lead to the basement," Arya whispered. It was a small chamber, dimly lit. There was a thick odor of decay, and the walls had shelves upon which ancient artifacts sat. In the middle of the room stood a stone sarcophagus, its surface covered in intricate carvings. "This must be it," Arya said, his voice reverent. The closer they came, the chillier the air grew. The figure of the pale widow shot forth a wail that went through the chamber, and it was more frightening than she had ever been. "Why have you come here?" Sundari Devi shouted, with a mixture of sorrow and fury in her voice. Arya held up the journal. "Sundari Devi, we know your truth. We want to help you find peace." The spirit's expression softened for a moment, but her anguish quickly returned. "Peace? There is no peace for me. Only justice can release me." "What justice?" Arya asked. Before she could answer, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The walls seemed to close in, and the air filled with deafening whispers. The spirit let out a scream, and the room was plunged into darkness. Arya and Karnesh stumbled backward up the stairs, nearly avoiding the chamber's collapse. Now, getting outside the Haveli, they lay down on the ground and gasped for air. "She wants justice," Arya said between his gasps. "But what kind of justice? We need to find out who betrayed her and why." Karnesh nodded, his face pale. "This is bigger than we thought. If we don't figure it out soon, we might not live to tell the tale." Unbeknownst to them, the pale widow watched from the shadows, her hollow eyes burning with a mix of hope and vengeance. The winds had howled that night around the village of Bhawanipur, a cacophony of whispers and moans carried through the mist. Arya and Karnesh sat in the small room of the inn, their faces drawn and pale. The events of the previous night had left an indelible mark on them. "Justice," Arya muttered, staring into the flickering flame of a kerosene lamp. "She said she needed justice. But how do we deliver justice to someone who's been dead for centuries?" Karnesh exhaled sharply, pacing the room. "We don't even know who betrayed her. The journal mentions suspicions about her husband and the servant, but it doesn't give us a name. We need more clues." Arya nodded his head, hardening his determination. "We are not going to find answers just by sitting there. We should go back inside the Haveli. I am sure we have more to look for." The following morning, Mira Bua saw the return of the two men. The old woman seemed to have aged overnight, her frailty more pronounced in her wrinkled hands as she clutched a rosary. "You lived through the night," she murmured, gazing at all of them in turn. "But the pale widow does not forgive so lightly. If you step across that threshold again, you risk your lives, not merely your lives, but your souls also." "We need to know more about the betrayal," Arya said determinedly. "The journal had a servant who was involved in the betrayal. Do you know him at all?" Mira hesitated before replying. "His name was Ramesh. He was once a trusted hand of the Raja, but greed corrupted him. It was said he was the one who whispered lies into the Raja's ears. After Sundari's death, Ramesh disappeared, but the villagers claimed they saw him wandering the forest at night, haunted by guilt." Karnesh frowned. "If he vanished, how do we find out what really happened?" She pointed toward the east. "The forest by the Haveli. They say his spirit still roams there. If you are looking for answers, you have to go there." The forest around Mokshgarh Haveli was inauspicious. Even during the day, the long shadows created by the tall trees seemed ominous. As Arya and Karnesh walked into the dense foliage, the air turned chill, and a stillness hung over them like an unnatural silence. "Do you feel that?" Karnesh whispered, his breath visible in the frigid air. Arya nodded. "It's like the forest itself is alive." They moved on, following Mira's instructions. Soon they came upon a clearing where the remains of a small hut stood, its wooden beams rotted and covered in moss. "This must have been where Ramesh lived," Arya said. As they drew closer, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, and the faint weeping reached their ears. "Who is there?" Arya called out, his voice trembling. The weeping grew louder and a translucent figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, his face gaunt and lined with sorrow. "Ramesh?" Karnesh asked hesitantly. The spirit nodded, his voice hollow. "I am the one you seek. Why have you come here?" "We need to know the truth about Sundari Devi," Arya said. "Why did you betray her?" Ramesh's spectral form trembled. "I was a fool," he confessed. "The Raja promised me wealth and power if I could prove her disloyalty. I planted false evidence, forged letters. I thought I was securing my future. But when I heard her screams as she was entombed alive, I realized the weight of my sins." The spirit's voice cracked with emotion. "Her death cursed this land. I have been trapped here ever since, unable to move on. Her wrath is justified, but her torment grows with each passing year. She needs the truth to come to light." "How do we do that?" Karnesh asked. "His resting place," Ramesh said, gesturing toward the Haveli. "Inside that sarcophagus are those forged letters. If you burn them in that temple, his soul may yet find peace." The return journey to the Haveli was unsettled. Shadows under trees seemed deeper. Even the air, it seemed, weighed more upon the lungs. As they rode toward the mansion, windows lighted faintly, as though the Haveli itself looked for them. Inside, the oppressive atmosphere returned, but Arya and Karnesh continued, again going down to the basement chamber. When they opened the sarcophagus, the pale widow appeared. She was even more frightening than before. Her hair floated like it would in water, her hollow eyes burning with rage. "You dare disturb my slumber again?" she bellowed. "We are here to save you," said Arya, raising the forged letters. "These falsehoods that have sentenced you here, we can destroy them, set you free." The rage in the spirit's face slackened, and a small flicker of hope arose in it. "Destroy them, but beware. The lies have power. They will not burn easily." At the temple, Pandit Vishwanath lit a sacred fire. The letters looked mundane, but as Arya placed them into the flames, the air filled with a deafening roar. The fire surged, casting eerie shadows that danced like tormented souls. The pale widow appeared once more, her form slowly dissolving into the light. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and filled with relief. "I am free." As she faded, the wind ceased, and a profound silence settled over Bhawanipur. The village of Bhawanipur was still, unnaturally quiet. The departure of the pale widow should have brought peace, yet the air seemed heavier, the shadows deeper. Arya and Karnesh stood outside the temple, gazing at the ashen remains of the forged letters. "She's gone," Arya said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We burned the lies. Her soul should be at peace now." "Should be," Karnesh echoed, his brow furrowed. "But something doesn't feel right. It's like we've only peeled back the first layer of a much darker secret." Returning to the inn, they found Mira Bua waiting for them. Her expression was grave, and the rosary in her hands trembled. "You think it's over?" she asked, her voice quivering. Arya hesitated. "The pale widow said she was free. We destroyed the letters as Ramesh's spirit instructed." Mira shook her head. "You have only woken a greater power. Sundari's curse was not simply about her death. It's tied to the land, to the blood spilled here in betrayal. The real darkness is the Raja's sin, and his spirit will not let you uncover it easily." Karnesh's face paled. "The Raja? But he's dead. How can his spirit still hold sway?" "His greed and cruelty anchored him here," Mira said. "If you truly wish to end this, you must confront him in the one place he still rules, the ruins beneath the Haveli." Armed with torches and a deepening sense of dread, Arya and Karnesh returned to Mokshgarh Haveli. The mansion loomed before them, more menacing than ever. The moonlight seemed to avoid its cracked walls, casting the building in perpetual shadow. "This does not feel right," Karnesh whispered, leading them into the main hall. "We have gone too far to return," he said to Arya, who smiled weakly. They followed a spiral staircase to a hidden door beneath the floor. Beyond the stone corridor, the walls are adorned with carvings that seem to tell the story of the Raja's reign. It grew cold with every step taken, and whispers of hushed tones seemed to fill the air. The passageway culminated into an enormous iron door. The metal was carved with images of violence, shackled prisoners, a queen begging for pardon, and a king upon a throne whose face was masked. "This is it," whispered Arya. A gust of cold air hit them as they opened the door. The chamber was large, its walls lined with shelves of scrolls and artifacts. There was a stone throne in the center, upon which sat a figure covered in darkness. "You have the temerity to enter my domain?" A deep, resonant voice boomed. The figure rose, the light of the torch revealing the spectral form of the Raja. His eyes glowed with malign light, and his presence seemed to draw warmth from the room. "You think you can undo my legacy?" he thundered. "This land is mine, and it will remain cursed for eternity. We are here to break the curse," Arya said, his voice firm and unyielding. "Your greed and betrayal killed Sundari. Her spirit deserves peace." The Raja laughed, a sound hollow and bone-chilling. "Peace? The weak don't get peace. Sundari was an idiot to believe me. And you're all idiots for thinking you can cross me. Go away now, or join her." Karnesh stepped forward. "You have ruled this land in terror for centuries. It ends tonight." The Raja bellowed, and the room erupted into chaos. The artifacts on the shelves flew through the air, and the ground shook violently. Arya and Karnesh fought against the spectral forces conjured by the Raja. The room became a vortex of wind and shadow, the whispers growing into deafening screams. "Focus on the throne," Arya shouted, remembering Mira's words. "If we destroy his seat of power, he'll lose his hold on this place." Karnesh nodded, using the torch to fend off ghostly figures. Arya reached the throne and found a dagger lying on its armrest. Its blade shimmered with an unnatural light. "Use this," the faint whisper breathed in his brain. "Sundari. That is the way to sever the connection with mortal life, it said. Fueled with newfound strength and determination, Arya drove the dagger into the throne. Raja shrieked at his form, disappearing like a puff of ash in a cloud. There was dead silence in the room now. The air unclung, as it were. As they emerged from the Haveli, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. The village seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "It's over," Karnesh said, though his tone was uncertain. Arya nodded, but his gaze remained on the Haveli. "For now, but curses like this don't die easily. We've only started to uncover the truth. There may be more secrets buried here." The triumph at Mokshgarh Haveli rang hollow. The oppressive aura of the Raja was lifted, but Arya and Karnesh knew something remained. The land itself appeared to defy peace, as if its very essence was soaked in malice and betrayal. Mirabua welcomed them back into the village with a grim face. She had spent all night at the temple, her rosary worn from constant recitations. "You did well," she said softly, "but the true heart of the curse is yet to be confronted." Arya frowned. The Raja is gone. What else could there be? "The Raja's avarice may have sparked this curse," Mira said, "but it was Sundari's grief, her betrayal, and the blood she shed in revenge that tied it here. To lift the curse, you will seek out her final resting place and bring her ashes back to the river." Karnesh shifted uncomfortably. How would her remains be after so many years? Tears glistened in Mira's eyes. Legends say she was buried alive under the roots of the banyan tree near the temple, where her tears watered the ground. The banyan tree was twisted and sinister, with its roots grabbing at the soil. Its deep canopy created twilight even in daytime. The locals avoided this place, deeming it to be cursed, but Arya and Karnesh could not help their way. Upon approaching, the wind started swaying in through the air and faint whispers emanated. "This is worse than the Haveli," Karnesh muttered to himself, hugging his torch. Arya knelt at the base of the tree, taking in the sight of the roots. Among them, a small stone marker stuck out of the ground, the surface worn, but still carrying faint carvings. "It's a burial marker," Arya said. "She's here." They started digging, the only sounds being the strike of their tools against the earth. Hours went by, and finally, they found a wooden casket, rotting at the edges but still intact. The whispers grew louder, now interspersed with faint sobs. Karnesh hesitated. "Are we sure about this?" Arya nodded, opening the casket. Inside lay the skeletal remains of Sundari, wrapped in tattered, blood-stained cloth. Her skull rested on a faded garland of marigolds. The moment the casket was opened, the ground did shake, shrieking shrill with a scream cut through the night air, while a spectral shape rose from among the remains. That was not at all the despondent creature they had seen hitherto, but a wraith of wrath and agony, her glowing eyes like melted gold. "You dare wake me?" she hissed, while her voice took on an otherworldly ring. Arya raised his hands. "We come in peace. We have come to liberate you, Sundari, to free you from all your suffering." "Free?" she spat. "I am shackled by pain, betrayal, and blood. Do you think you can undo centuries of torment with just words?" Karnesh approached cautiously. "We have met the Raja. We know the truth of his betrayal. Let us take your ashes back to the river, as you asked." Sundari's form flickered, her anger giving way to sorrow. The river. It was all I desired, but the curse is not so easily broken. The blood spilled here binds this land. You must cleanse it with fire. Mirabua had prepared for this moment, guiding Arya and Karnesh through the rituals necessary to cleanse the land. They gathered sacred oils, herbs, and a consecrated urn to hold Sundari's ashes. The villagers watched from a distance as the trio prepared the pyre beneath the banyan tree. Arya carefully placed Sundari's remains atop the stacked wood. While Karnesh lit the fire, the flames roared to life, casting long shadows that danced across the clearing. Sundari's spirit hovered above the fire, her features softening as the flames consumed her remains. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But the curse will not lift until the blood debt is paid." Before Arya could respond, the ground split open, revealing a pit of swirling darkness. From it emerged shadowy forms, apparitions of the villagers who had betrayed Sundari and those who had suffered under the Raja's rule. The apparitions circled Arya and Karnesh, their hollow eyes filled with malice. Mirabua shouted over the chaos. "They are the anchors of the curse. Their spirits are bound to the land. You must release them." "But how?" Arya shouted back. "The dagger!" Mira cried, pointing to the blade Arya had used to destroy the Raja's throne. "Use it to sever their ties to this world." Arya held the dagger tightly as the spirits leapt at him. With every slash of the blade, there was a wail that sounded through the clearing, and the dark shapes evaporated into tendrils of smoke. Karnesh shielded Mira, swinging his torch at the spirits remaining. The battle continued until there was only one spirit left, a monstrous, hellish form that emanated pure malevolence. "The source of the curse," Mira whispered. "The spirit of the Raja's betrayal." The apparition loomed over Arya, its form flickering between the Raja and a grotesque, demonic thing. "You can't beat me," it growled. "This land stays mine, and its blood seeps into the roots of every tree." Arya steadied himself. "This land belongs to the people, not to your greed and hatred." With a final spurt of bravery, Arya thrust the dagger into the chest of the apparition. The spirit screamed, its form unwinding into streams of light and shadow. The ground shuddered violently before it steadied and fell into an unearthly silence. When the dawn broke, the banyan tree stood alone, its roots no longer twisted with malice. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive weight that had haunted the village for centuries was gone. Sundari's spirit appeared one last time, her form now serene and radiant. "You have done what no one else could," she said. "The curse is broken. The land is free." "Thank you." With that, she vanished, leaving behind a faint glow that bathed the clearing in warmth. Arya and Karnesh stood in silence, their hearts heavy but hopeful. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the memories of their journey would remain with them forever.